Welcome to AP Environmental Science. In this video, we are going to talk about this phenomena called the Green Revolution. Now, the Green Revolution is not talking about green as in this big movement towards being more environmentally friendly. No. Instead, when we're talking about green, we're talking about a bunch of plants. And the industry that grows the most plants would be agriculture. So the Green Revolution has to do with this shift from these small mom-and-pop farms to large-scale mechanized or industrial agriculture that uses more fertilization, uses pesticides, along with irrigation to improve and increase the crop varieties. And this has all happened in the last 100 years. Now, in order to produce all of this extra food, it's going to take more energy. And that's where this idea of an energy subsidy comes in. So fossil fuel energy and human energy is needed for each calorie of food that is produced. Now remember, calorie is a term that describes the amount of energy that's required to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Now in the United States, it takes 10 calories of energy in terms of fossil fuel use in order to produce 1 calorie of food. Now, it's not just fossil fuel, it comes from a few other sources as well, particularly the energy needed to produce fertilizers and pesticides, also the energy to produce the tractors, and then to run all of that heavy machinery. Additionally, we have energy that's used to pump water for irrigation systems, and after that food is grown and harvested, we still need to transport that from the field to the food processing facility and then to the supermarket. So each step in this process requires a huge amount of energy. Now, most of this fossil fuel use is due to the mechanization of the overall agricultural process. And this mechanization relies upon the economies of scale. Now, this is an economics idea where your average cost of production is going to decrease as the amount of your product or your output increases. So your cost per individual item is going to go down. Now, in order to bump up to this mechanized process, this is going to cost a lot of money. Each of these individual tractors or combines or even grain carts, that's all going to cost upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these small-scale farms just don't have the money to be able to keep up. And as a result, we're seeing that the average farm size is starting to increase. Now, if we look at this graph, back in 1900, the average farm size was about 150 acres. And by the year 1997, that was all the way up to 500 acres. If we look at the average farm size today, it's even larger. And again, these small-scale mom-and-pop farms are just not able to compete with these larger operations. If you compare the United States to other parts of the world, and again, this table is in hectares instead of acres, you can still clearly see the trend that the average farm size in the United States is quite a bit bigger than anywhere else in the world. And the reason for farms being so large in the United States has to do with some of our agricultural practices that have allowed us to develop that economy of scale. One of those practices is called monocropping. Now, monocropping is planting a single variety of species in a very large space. So this is where you'll have a field that just has rows and rows and rows of corn in it. Now, the benefit is that this is super efficient. You only need to have one type of planter. You only need to have that one type of combine for that particular field. But the drawback is that you're going to have more soil erosion because this whole large swath of land is going to be turned over all at the same amount of time. You're also going to have higher vulnerability to pests. So if you have a pest move into a new area, it is going to have this beautiful buffet of its favorite food all in one location, and that can really decimate a single field. This also is resulting in a loss of some genetic diversity in that particular location, and this is also going to lead to a lack of predators to some of those pest species. Another thing that has happened over the years, and this is historical agriculture, would use what's called artificial selection. Now, this is the traditional selection for desired crop traits, or this is specific crossbreeding or selective breeding of your plants. Now, this has happened for thousands of years, and this is the reason we were able to go from having wild mustard and turning that same plant into cauliflower, broccoli, cabbage, kale, and kohlrabi. These are all derived from a single ancestor plant, and this has all happened relatively recently if you're thinking in evolutionary terms. Now, humans have sped up that process by doing what's called GMO foods, or genetically modified organisms. And what happens here is scientists are able to isolate and identify a specific gene that codes for a specific desirable trait. And they're able to move that gene from one species into another to help speed up this artificial selection. And this is what allows us to have all of this variety of food that we see at the supermarket today. Now, there are benefits to this. This increases the amount of food that's able to be produced in the amount of land that we have. This also improves the quality of the crop. So now we have pest and drought resistant crops, which reduces the need for extra water and reduces the need for pesticides. This also reduces the overall expenses because we don't have to pay for that extra irrigation of the land and we don't have to pay for the extra chemicals. That's going to increase the profits for the farmer, and it's going to lower the food prices at the supermarket. But the drawbacks. A lot of people, when GMOs first came out, started to question, is this really safe for human consumption? But here's the thing. There's been a lot of research into this, and there is very little evidence to support these GMOs being harmful for humans. The other concern that people had was that this could lead to a loss of biodiversity due to cross-pollination of the plants. Again, yes, there has been some cross-pollination that's been recorded. However, this has not resulted in recorded research of there being this big wipeout. So overall, GMOs have been pretty good. In fact, if you think about the tomatoes that you can buy at the supermarket, the shelf life of a tomato that you grow in your backyard of an heirloom or non-GMO variety really only has a shelf life about 10 days. But if we look at some of these GMO tomatoes, they have a significantly longer shelf life due to the selective breeding and the genetic modification to give them the trait that allows them to stay fresh for longer. And if we think of the distance that a lot of our food has to travel, this is a good thing. So more of the food that's harvested in the field actually makes it to your table in your home. Now, in summary, the Green Revolution really increased food production capabilities, which is allowing us to feed an ever-growing human population. We also talked a little bit about the idea of an energy subsidy, and most of the energy input is coming from the use of fossil fuels. We also talked a little about the mechanization of agriculture and that economy of scale, which really helps to make agriculture profitable. And some of the ways that agriculture has become so profitable is because of processes such as monocropping, artificial selection, and genetically modified foods. Now, please leave your questions here at the end, and I hope that as you watch this video, you were able to learn something.